Thank you very much, Les Concorla. I'm sharing time with Deputy Duncan Smith. It's said that RTE does too many repeats, and so does this government. There is some truth in the hackneyed description that this is a late show budget with one for everyone in the audience. But it's worse still. It's a really in-the-ears budget. A lazy rerun of all that was wrong with Budget 2023. Tax cuts that favour the better off again. Failure to properly fund the public services on which we all rely and which the citizens of this rich republic should expect again. And a wall of once-off payments, but no permanent change. And once those once-off payments are gone, they're gone. A budget that will, yet again, be found to be regressive once lump sum payments melt away like snow on a ditch. And like the Late Show, we've changed the faces. The formula is the same, no matter who's fronting the gig. Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil, it simply doesn't matter. In my almost 14 years here, I've rarely seen such frustration and anxiety among the general public. And there are many reasons for that. And this is the first time since 2010 that a Fianna Fáil finance minister has delivered a budget. And what do? You give nonsensical tax reliefs to landlords. Same old Fianna Fáil. €160 million in tax reliefs to landlords. More in tax reliefs to landlords than you provide cash-wise to individual renters. And having fixed the economy, 2016 to 2020 was the chance to fix our society, to build homes, to invest in public childcare, to get to grips with the climate catastrophe, to get our health service right, to start the work of tackling divisive inequality gaps, to build the foundations of a better and more sustainable future. But they were wasted years, and they're years for which we are still paying the price. Now fast forward to 2023. Under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, Ireland is a country of contrasts, and yes, a country of contradictions. We're rich and poor at the same time, saving almost €7 billion in bank accounts last spring, when 2 out of every 5 of us can't lay our hands on €1,000 to meet an out-of-the-blue bill. Over 20% of us are officially in low pay, when Irish corporate profits break records, yet we still cannot get the basics of running this country right. Now, as someone who's proud of our country, and prouder still of the great country we can be, it absolutely gives me no pleasure whatsoever to say that. And if a country ever donned the proverbial fur coat, and you know the rest of the old crude colloquialism, it is Ireland. Now, Ministers, just read the piece in last Monday week's Financial Times. It took a look behind that tatty coat, and it asks, how can a rich country have, and I quote, transport, health, education and water services under increasing strain? Why can the 2/3 of young people imprisoned in the purgatory of their childhood bedroom not afford to rent or to realistically dream of owning their own home? Why are 1 in 10 Irish people on health waiting lists for more than 18 months when the official target is 3? Now, thankfully, and we should be grateful for this, nobody told them how much it costs a working family to get the kind of childcare that people in Denmark and people in Sweden, citizens of other rich countries, rightly take for granted. Now, that would have been embarrassing. And we are, as IBEC's Fergal O'Brien said to the Financial Times, nouveau riche. What is the point, he said, of us being a wealthy country if we don't have the things we need the most? Physical infrastructure, social and public services. IBEC got it in one. And the Irish Congress of Trade Unions agree, both sides of industry. But tax cuts. Tax cuts. The perennial Fine Gael answer to a question absolutely nobody's asking. I can't get an assessment for my child. You know what? How about a shiny tax cut instead? I'm 12 years on a housing waiting list. I know, but here's a £5 a week. Good luck to you. I could really do with more affordable childcare. I suppose you could, but there's a tenner back in your USC. Now jog on. Performative tax cuts. What we need are performing public services. Now, every euro in a tax cut, if not replaced by taxes elsewhere, is €1 less for the social wage, for schools, for hospitals, for childcare, for community safety. And the kind of tax cuts that were presented today that disproportionately favour the better off are as fiscally unwise as they were socially damaging. Now, throughout our party's long history, Labour was never short of vision. It was the resources we were always short of. Today, and on the evidence of this botched budget, well, we have the money. This government is woefully short of the vision we need to transform this society. €2.7 billion in once-off measures is no small sum of money. It's a lot of money, but spread so thinly that nobody will be happy. Such a wall of money and lump sum payments is no cause for backslapping, the likes of which we saw on the backbenches earlier on. That doesn't demand a standing ovation. The necessity of these once-off measures should be worn as a badge of shame by this Conservative coalition. Why are these interventions needed? They're needed because, under your watch, the real value of workers' wages has dropped. On your watch, living standards have fallen like a stone, and for the first time since we waved goodbye to the Troika in 2013. Under Fianna Fáil, yes, Fianna Fáil, the spending power of the pension has been effectively cut 3 budgets in a row. And where is Willie O'D when Fianna Fáil needs him? Over 20% of workers are still on low pay, and deprivation rates were up 4 points when you crafted last year's budget. One you had to follow up with a mini-budget in February because you got it so wrong this time last year. And you wouldn't need to spend so much today if you got things right then. Those who are most in need are still paying the price for below inflation social welfare increases last year. And remember, no increases to child benefit last year, no increases to the living alone allowance or child benefit at all. €2.7 billion in another so-called once-off package needed because you're too ideologically blinkered to make the structural changes needed to make our economy work better, to make it fairer. And here we have the return of our old friend, the energy credit, the very definition of an untargeted payment. Popular, yes, but populist too. A questionable use of public money, especially from those who pretend to be prudent. Let's put this in some context. You spent €1.2 billion this year handing out €600 of free money to me and hundreds of thousands of others who did not need and do not need it. €1.2 billion is €100 million less than you plan to spend on increases to all welfare schemes next year. It's multiples of what this government plans to spend on combating child poverty, and this absolutely beggars belief. The Labour's €3 billion package of cost of living measures targets the money where it's needed most. And October, and not just a Christmas bonus for those who need it most this year, not wait until January. €15 a month immediately on the pension, carers and other payments. And our party leader, Deputy Malabachik's innovation, our €9 per month climate public transport ticket to relieve pressure on commuters, on students and to help our climate. A doubling of the rent credit to €1,000 now. Not €750, €1,000 and now. And crucially, an emergency €90 million empty homes fund to bring homes back into use for our young people and the almost 13,000 people who are living in desperate homelessness. Money to where it's needed the most and now. On every single top-line economic and fiscal measurement, Ireland is doing well. Income tax is up, VAT is up, employment is up, and the corporation tax figures speak for themselves. We have a surplus, and even when we strip away any so-called windfall corporation tax surpluses next year, we will still report a surplus. We're the envy of Europe on the revenue side, but the poor relation on economic equality and childcare, health and housing. And for too many, this budget won't change a thing. If you're poor today, you'll be poor tomorrow. And based on what we know now, you will be even poorer next year. Politics is about choices. And the choices made in this budget, at a time of unprecedented plenty, do simply not pass the tests of social solidarity and of fairness. Will it make the permanent changes needed to lift families and children out of poverty? No, it simply won't. Will it truly reward work by actually using our taxes the way workers want them used to fund the care system that is the mark of a decent society? It doesn't. Will it deliver the step change on housing our young people and the future competitiveness of our economy so desperately needs? That's a big fat no too. But Labour's €11 billion costed package maps out an Ireland that works for all. Not just an Ireland that works if you earn over 70 grand a year, not just an Ireland that works if you own your own home, not just an Ireland that works if the cost of living crisis is something you've only heard about on the news. On work, on care, on housing, on climate, we need an Ireland that works for all. Now, Ireland's low pay problem is chronic. 1 in 5 are officially low paid. And our welfare system, as you know only too well, Taoiseach, having served as a Minister for Social Protection, must do far too much heavy lifting to keep our working poor out of poverty. And there is no dignity in our working poor, or anybody who works for a living, having to rely on cash transfers from the Department of Social Protection merely to exist or to subsist. That's why, in Labour's view, the national minimum wage must go up €2 an hour to €13.30 and not €1.40. In fact, it is manifestly obvious that we wouldn't have the kinds of national minimum wage increases that we've experienced in the last few years if it were not for the introduction by Labour of the Low Pay Commission. There is no way on this God's earth that Fine Gael left alone would do that if the decision was theirs. We need to move more quickly to a real living wage, not the rebranded, watered-down version government has in mind. In our costed alternative budget, Labour has ring-fenced €1.3 billion for a new public service pay agreement. The talks have yet to commence, but this allows for, in the region of a cumulative 5% increase next year for our nurses, our healthcare assistants, teachers, SNAs, guards, council workers and civil servants. Looking at the documents, there doesn't seem to be any government allocation for public sector pay rises at all. Where is that allocation? We need to know. And in fact, Sinn Féin's allocation in their own alternative budget should make public servants who require a pay increase next year equally concerned. The truth is, when we look at public service pay, when we take inflation into account, public sector pay is at 2012 levels, and the rate of pay increases are in fact in recent years well below the rates of increase in the private sector. The Justice Minister has yet again shown us that she has no deafness of touch whatsoever when it comes to An Garda Síochána. I want to focus for a moment on Garda pay. At a time when a record 114 Gardaí have hung up their boots already this year, when communities are in crisis, when they're demanding community policing to feel more secure in their own homes and their communities, you stick a few euros on the training allowance. That's a Hail Mary pass, if I ever saw one, hoping everything will work out well. How was this figure worked out? Nobody seems to know. It was plucked from the air. It just doesn't make sense. €305 up from 184. That's less than the current rate of the national minimum wage. Less than the national minimum wage. That's what we're expecting new Garda recruits to exist on. That's an insult to a new recruit. Taoiseach, you yourself have admitted that new recruits are often older than former intakes and are leaving jobs, good jobs in some cases, to join the Guards. And some, of course, will have families and financial commitments, and your public comments admit that. But at this rate, they won't be queuing up to join or to stay in training in Templemore. In fact, they won't be able to complete their training at all. And something much more radical needs to be done. For a small €15 million a year, as proposed by Labour, new recruits could be put on the starting salary for a Garda of €35,000 across their training period. If the Minister is serious about making a Garda Síochána an attractive proposition for the right kind of recruit, this is what she needs to do, and she needs to do it now. We get a real sense of this government's priorities when we look at the social protection package. It's incredible that the tax cut and the 2024 welfare package are more or less the same size, but when you dig a little deeper, they're not. The tax package amounts to €1.3 billion. €1.3 billion in tax cuts. The social welfare package is, wait for it, €1.1 billion. Go figure. At a time when people are finding it exceptionally difficult to make ends meet. And we know who those most impacted by the inflation and cost of living crisis are. Just look at this. A quick analysis will show if you're a single person with €75,000 who owns your own home, you're up over €2,000 already, thanks to your mortgage interest rate squeeze and income tax and EOSC changes. But a pensioner in a council house who can't keep themselves warm, it's about €700 or €800. So who needs a break more? And clearly from this budget, the government has picked a side, and it's sticking to it. When welfare rates needed to be increased by €27.50 a week, you give 12. This isn't a figure that Labour has plucked out of the air. When we're going to look at our welfare system, when are we going to look at our welfare system through the lens of income adequacy, the well-established benchmark of minimum essential standard of living? Society actually has a settled view that core welfare payments must be set at 34% of average income. Actually, Fianna Fáil used to believe the same, but that was back in 2007. And a lot has changed since then. And you've moved away from that principle. This year's budget leaves those who are depending on small and fixed incomes still gasping for air. That's why Labour is clear. We actually need to grow up, we need to mature, and we need to decide, as a society, to index our social welfare and personal tax systems. It would be the mark of a mature democracy if this was just done automatically, routinely, every year, rather than using the summer months filling the papers with speculation and spin ahead of the budget being finalised, playing with people's lives. Now that would be a game changer. The Social Protection Minister knows only too well that there is an extra cost involved in living with a disability. We need to see a new cost of disability payment, as Labour has called for, starting at €20 a week in this budget. That's the kind of reform we need for people with disabilities who need help to live with dignity, not the Tory-inspired racket that this government looked set to propose a few weeks ago. I'm pleased to see that the process of pay-related benefits seems to have commenced at last. We don't have the detail, and Labour has gone some way to proposing an initiation of that process in our own costed alternative budget. But the Minister's long-awaited initiative has come far too late for the people I represent who work, or did work, in Tara Mines. And I heard the Minister speak of the fate of the workers in Tara Mines on the radio on Sunday. Our view is that the Tara Mines job losses could have been avoided in their entirety if government took Labour's long-standing advice to establish a German-style short-time work scheme with seed funding of €400 million. We wouldn't be talking now about people who are out of work, we'd be talking about supporting people in work and with training and skills development when they are furloughed. And I note that government has said today that they are starting to make adjustments to the PRSI base on a cumulative basis over the next period of time. 0.1% increases in PRSI across the board, when in fact what's ultimately needed, because we know that employers' PRSI is well behind the EU norm, is more significant increases to bring those levels up to EU norm in terms of employers' PRSI. This is the responsible thing to do for the workers of today, the pensioners of the future. And setting up a dedicated wealth fund to help with ageing costs should not mean that we pretend that ageing costs are covered. They're not, and they never could be covered by a fund the likes of which government is proposing and the likes of which we support. Now, there's never been a better time to start adjusting PRSI. Why do I say that? It's not just my hunch, it's what all of the experts say. Full employment, a red-hot economy of capacity, a precarious and unbalanced tax system. This government really needs to get a move on and stop avoiding unpopular decisions. You're proposing a back-of-the-envelope scheme to help small businesses shoulder extra costs. Now, we understand the motivation of this initiative, but it has all the hallmarks of a SOP, a bribe to business. And how it's designed and applied is crucially important. We don't have the detail. Now, Labour has no difficulty with the concept of support schemes for viable enterprises going through a difficult time. We have shown that time and again. But there must be, in any transfer of wealth from taxpayers to enterprise. There must be social, labour, quality job and collective bargaining conditions attached. Or have we not learned any lessons at all from the operation of the wage subsidy scheme, for example? And we also must be conscious as well, from what we read in the media, it seems that this money is being taken from commercial rates. So who is going to fill the hole left in public service provision for our local authorities? And any such scheme must be limited to firms of a certain size and legal structure. I want to turn now, Minister, to the question of child poverty. I have to admit that my heart danced a little last December when I heard the Taoiseach pledge that he would tackle child poverty head on. I was delighted, but I should have been more wary. This government shamefully has not passed its very first test on child poverty. We needed a children's budget to end child poverty. Instead, we got a budget for landlords, some homeowners and higher earners. Minister, in 2022, nearly 200,000 children lived in households that were below the poverty line. And 250,000 children were living in households experiencing deprivation. Now, child poverty is a national scandal. It's a national scandal. It must be ended. But we know today that will not be ended by this government. In fact, the Taoiseach would be better off saying nothing in December. This is an insult to the poorest children and the poorest families in this country. He would have been better off keeping his mouth shut and saying nothing. He has raised expectations that child poverty could be eradicated in this country, and he's done nothing about it. Labour proposed a series of measures, including making a good start by increasing the qualified child payment to €15 for children over 12 and €10 for the under 12s. What did you do? You added a miserable €4, €4 a week to the qualified child payment. And it's nowhere near sufficient to give every child in this country a fair break and a decent start. And Minister, well, poverty is not only about money, it's actually always about money. And every single member, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party should hang their heads in collective shame today. That promise has not been delivered on. And what we ultimately want to see is a movement towards the kind of programme that the ESRI and the Community Foundation of Ireland have proposed. That is a second tier of child benefit payment for those in real need, targeted at those children who need it the most, to eradicate the scourge of child poverty. Nowhere does this budget disappoint more than when it comes to childcare. It's promised little and it's delivered less. The Minister's only just managed to persuade his Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael colleagues at the 11th hour that childcare fees should come down by the promised 25%. It's an 11th hour job designed to avoid the blushes. Nowhere does this budget disappoint more. Of course, the 25% cut that the Minister spoke about won't come into effect, in fact, till next September 2024. It's almost a year away. So for children who started creche in 2019 or 2020, their parents will only have seen one reduction during their time in early years. The situation is stark for parents, for children and for skilled professionals in the sector. The picture painted by the results of a survey recently undertaken by my colleague Senator Maurice Sherlock in Dublin Central is revealing. And in my experience, the results are bang on the money. Nearly half of parents cutting back on working hours to make childcare arrangements work. 21% said one parent had to give up work. Severe shortage of places for babies under 1. Services that are barely affordable if they're available at all. Small and agile services that have been around for a long time, some of them, closing. A picture any of us representing urban Ireland will recognise. So when are we going to wake up and decide to revolutionise how we do quality early years in Ireland? The course we are on is manifestly not the right one. We need a system built on equality for children, affordability for parents and fairness for professionals. It's why Labour says we need to get a start on our vision of a universal public childcare system with 5,000 to 6,000 places at a cost of €65 million in 2024, a cap of €200 a month in fees and an increased investment of €142 million in core funding as a glide path to fair pay for professionals. Now, a minimum of €92 million was the cost that the SIP2 Big Start campaign costed and said was needed to improve paying conditions by at least €2 an hour. A further 50 million then would be needed to recognise length of service and qualifications. That's what's needed to truly revolutionise our early years system. Now, this government have been criminally ill-prepared for the crisis in care that's developing, and the census laid this bare. Between 2016 and 22, the number of people providing regular unpaid care increased by over 50%, from just under 200,000 people in 2016 to 300,000 in 2022. What a level of growth. And we still have too many people who care full-time for a loved one whose work is not adequately recognised by this state. We could change that overnight. For a very small amount of money, we could make sure that at least everyone in receipt of the respite grant gets the carer's allowance in recognition of their invaluable work. It's time for the lip service to end. And our party leader, Deputy Manabachik, was not wrong when she said that housing is the civil rights issue of our time. But this third government doesn't see housing as an issue of rights. For you, housing is a commodity, and a house is something to transact, an asset to buy and sell. And when the eye-catching budget intervention on housing are tax relief for landlords and mortgage interest relief, what's left of your credibility is gone. Now, reintroducing mortgage interest relief is an interesting use of public money. Those on fixed-rate mortgages, those who fixed their rates maybe last year or the year before, are rightly asking today, what about me? And it seems you'll need, insofar as what we know about this scheme, 2 years of mortgage interest statements to qualify for the scheme. So what about those who are on fixed mortgages? And what happens next year, for example, if somebody comes off a fixed rate into a very, very different interest rates environment? That's a question, and it's populism this government cannot seem to answer. Housing for all is a busted flush. In the lifetime of your signature plan, all we've got to thank you for is a 50% rise in homelessness, record rents and record house prices. 4,000 homeless children, and you swear blind that your grand plan is working. Your plan is failing, and today's budget tells me all you're going to do is fail better. Your limp, anemic, vacant homes tax is set so low that you've had to review it before you even start sending out the bills. You announced it a year ago, and the rubber still hasn't hit the road. Your hands-off approach to vacancy and dereliction is an utter disgrace.
Hear, hear.
It is state-sponsored vandalism, and the victims are first-time buyers and communities across the country. We have anything between, depending on what you read, 25,000, 70,000 or 170,000 homes lying idle in the Ireland of 2023. You're not switched off that you can't even properly measure the scale of the problem because you simply don't seem to care. Because property and property rights means everything to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Until that changes, nothing will change. If you can afford to leave a home vacant for years, or a building you own derelict and abandoned, your pocket should be squeezed until the pips squeak. That's why Labour says, slap a levy of 1% of value, €2,000, whatever's the highest, on the owners of vacant homes. Get it moving, or the council should put a CPO on it. And disgracefully, this tells you all you need to know about Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. You've decided to kick the residential zone land tax into touch for another year. The farmers got to you, the developers got to you. And government still sneers at Labour's plans for 1 million homes over 10 years. 50,000 new builds and 50,000 vacancies. Empty council homes and derelict would-be dwellings turned around to meet the needs of a growing population and our economic needs too. That's the level of ambition we need. It's the level of ambition Fianna Fáil, true to what they like, was to think their values were back in their halcyon days, would do. And yes, there are capacity issues, and one way you could deal with that is by, for example, paying apprentices at least the rate of the national minimum wage, giving the housing agency responsibility for construction skills. This could all be done at the stroke of a pen if the political will is there. And in the meantime, Those who can manage to find a place to rent need the rent credit to be up to the €1,000, not the €750 you announced today, and you need to take on board Labour's Renters' Rights Bill and institute a scheme of no-fault eviction so the law protects people in insecure tenancies. But there is simply no substitution for supply, and public supply at that. Labour's plan is very, very clear indeed. What we would do is do much more than the government is prepared to do this year. In fact, across all capital programmes, you're only planning to spend an additional €250 million. We would inject another €1.6 billion into capital investment to build, for example, 2,700 more social homes, building on your own less than adequate proposals. And I'll conclude on this. Labour is ambitious for Ireland, but we are responsible too. And I want to speak for a moment about the role of the state and the plans brought forward by the Minister today in relation to the use of the surplus. We agree that the surplus in corporation tax should not be spent on current expenditure. It should be used, for example, to build the homes that we need in the future. It should be used as well to make sure that the just transition actually means something. That transition phase has not been scoped out for people. We need to make sure that that investment that's required for communities across the country is injected, is used wisely and is used properly. And finally, I'll say this. We need a discussion on tax. It is simply not good enough to say we can continue to spend and tax the way we are at the moment, continuing to reduce taxes while increasing spending. We've yet to have a debate in this House on proposals from the Commission on Tax and Welfare this time last year. This government is afraid of it. This government is afraid of it because the Commission has rightly proposed that we move away from taxes on income, on labour, and towards taxes on assets and capital. That's the future. That's what needs to be done. Government needs to mature and grow up, take on that responsibility, and make sure we've got a tax system that works to make an Ireland that works for all.